Hi everybody, welcome back to the Master Flow Plumbing YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about supply lines. Supply lines are these guys right here, and there's many different kinds of them, but we're going to just talk about the most popular kinds today. But before we do, I'd like you to click that subscribe button in that lower right hand corner down there. And if you don't, all your drain lines in your house are going to back up. I'm sure of it. So anyways, let's talk about these things. If you look underneath your sinks, and if you look to the left side of your toilet, you're going to probably notice something similar to these. These are actually the devices that actually take the water from the main plumbing in the house up to each fixture, and we call them supply lines. And again, there are many different kinds of them, so we're going to talk about just the most popular kinds right now, and actually some of the kinds that actually we used to use in the past. So what you would probably see is something like this here next to your toilet. I know we have this in a vise, but we're just going to do a static demonstration here today on what these all are and what some of the differences are on them. But normally this would be attached to this, and this would go up to a toilet. And the same thing, like if you had a sink supply, you'd have a couple of them that come up to the sink. So let's talk about the different kinds. Okay, so first of all, back in the day, these were your ordinary chrome-plated brass supply tubes. This particular one is a faucet supply or a lav supply, and these are probably some of the more difficult ones to work with these days because they were not intended for the average homeowner to actually use. These were used by the plumbers. These were quite decorative because you could get them in different finishes, and they all, they look good. You still might see these if you have a pedestal sink because the plumbing shows on a pedestal, but these are not commonly used, but normally you'd have a 1/2 inch nut that has to go up here and connects up here to the faucet, and then on this end would be where it connects here. And while we're at that, let's talk about this for a second. These are always connected with a compression type fitting, which is what these shutoff valves actually have as a compression nut. And there are two pieces to that. There's the actual 3/8 compression nut and then the 3/8 compression ring. This ring that is used for this type of supply line, doesn't matter which way it goes on, but if you're using a plastic one, I'll get to that in just a moment. So that would go on there like that, this would go on here like that, and then you would actually get that in there like that, and then you would actually tighten that down. We are not going to tighten that down for this demonstration. We're actually going to be doing a video upcoming on compression fittings, and you will have to learn how to deal with that end of it, from that video. But so that covers the brass supply tubes. Next in line, and probably one of the most popular still to this day, is going to be either the polybutylene supply tubes, or in this particular case, this is a PEX supply tube. And these are pretty popular. They're flexible, that you can bend them, you can cut them to length. As where these other ones, if you want to cut these to length, you have to actually use a copper cutter or other method, to do it, but copper tubing cutter is the best way to cut those. But on these, you can actually use a pair of PEX cutters, even a knife if you had to and you didn't have anything else. The thing to remember with these is that they still attach to the faucets the same way, or to the bottom of your toilet the same way with a, there's usually a nut right here that will go up and attach to the faucets. Most faucets come with them if they use this type. Nowadays, most faucets are coming with supply lines built onto them, which makes them very much user-friendly for the average homeowner, and even for us plumbers too. It's kind of nice that they do that now. The thing with these though is that if you're going to connect it to this side right here, when you're doing this compression fitting down here, first thing you're going to want to do is get rid of this brass, what they call brass ferrule. And we would not use this on a plastic tube. The reason being is because when you tighten this down on here, these rings get compressed onto this tube, and these brass ones will cut into this plastic tube, and you could potentially have a flood just waiting to happen after you do that. So don't do that. Discard those. Now they make a plastic one that is made for the plastic tubing, and these are directional. If you look, they have a tapered end that's smaller on the bottom and then a bigger end at the top. Well, you want that bigger end to be at the top. The tapered end always goes into the compression fitting. I have a friend of mine who actually made that mistake one time and had a pretty bad flood, and I felt really bad for him. It was a job that we were actually supposed to do, and the faucet wasn't there yet. And he said, you know what? He says, I'll take care of that one, when it comes in next week. And unfortunately, he put one of those on upside down, and eventually that tube just blew out of there, and it flooded the kitchen of the customer's house that we'd been working on. I apologize, Chris. I don't want to bring you into that one. I know that wasn't, something that, you normally would do, but it happened, and I want to use it as an example to teach the average homeowner what not to do. So if you're going to use one of these, make sure you use the correct ferrule on there, and make sure it is in the right direction. So again, to do that end of it, you would actually put that on there like that. Make sure that tapered end is always facing down to where it's going to go into the compression fitting. And then again, you're going to just snug that up by hand. And then from that point, like I said, watch our other video on compression fittings. It'll be coming out soon. So that covers the PEX and the polybutylene type tubes. Let's talk about these guys. Okay, these are the most popular nowadays, and probably the most user-friendly and foolproof method, to actually use. They come with the nut already built onto this side. No need to have any of those ferrules or those brass rings, plastic rings, none of that stuff. I've gotten to where I use these quite often too, because they are so foolproof almost. If you look inside of there, they got a nice little rubber nose piece in them that actually makes a very good seal. You don't have to worry about getting these things compressed onto the pipe properly or anything. You just want to make sure they thread on properly and that they actually are tight, and you'll almost never have a leak with these if you do it correctly. So there are many different versions of these on the market. I prefer these. These actually have a metal nut on both ends. They almost always will here, but I see quite a few of them that have plastic nuts on this side. And the problem with the plastic is when they get over tightened, they split, and you can actually have a flood or a bad leak from that. So if you can find them that have the heavy brass nut or the chrome plated brass nut on here like that, that is definitely ideal. So with that said, sinks and toilets are different. This is one for a sink faucet, lab faucet, whatever you want to call it. And they do have a different end that actually threads onto basically a piece of 1/2-inch iron pipe, which is what faucet threads basically are. It's just 1/2-inch iron pipe. The toilets are a little bit different. These actually are a 7/8, and they're made to go on to the bottom of the fill valve of the toilet. So that little plastic shank, or sometimes brass shank, that sticks out of the bottom of the toilet on the left hand side is where this connects to, and then the other end goes down to your shutoff valve. Now, connecting these to a shutoff valve, if you're replacing this on your toilet, you would actually discard this. You will not need either of those pieces. This piece right here will actually just thread on, and then you're going to snug that a little bit. You're going to get it as tight as you can by hand. You're going to take your 5/8 wrench, and you're going to just tighten it down like so until it stops. Starting to feel a little resistance right there. And again, we don't want to over tighten necessarily, but nice little snug like that is usually good enough, because it gets that rubber pushed down into there and makes a good seal. And the other end would just simply go up to your toilet. So that's actually how that's going to work. The only other thing that I would like to point out to you here is that there is a way to extend these. These come in different lengths. Most common ones are 20-inch, which is what these are. They make them in 12-inch. They make them in, I believe, 18-inch, 24-inch, and I've seen them as long as 36-inch and even 48 inches long. Most of the time, 20-inch is going to cover your needs. However, if you do find yourself in the need to extend one of these sometime, they do make ones that actually will come. They'll come like this, basically. And they'll have 2 3/8 ends. One side will be a compression fitting that you can basically add on to, and then the other side is the side that goes onto your supply feed right there. If you need to extend these though, you can actually just discard that, and you can actually screw these two together like so. Make sure you get it good and tight. Use your wrenches to put that together, and now you have made one 40 inches long, which you probably aren't going to need, but there are some situations out there where you may. So that's basically supply line 101 for everybody. There are other types out there. There are shutoff valves out there that have supply lines built onto them. I'm not a big fan of those myself, but there are other kinds that are out there. And even some of the old school ones are actually made out of copper. You may encounter those from time to time. But for the majority of the homes out there nowadays, underneath the kitchen sink or bathroom sink, you're going to have at least a couple of these, one for the hot, one for the cold, and then these tubes will actually feed the water up to your faucet. That's supply line 101 in a nutshell. That's going to conclude today's video. I'd like to remind you to go ahead and click that subscribe button down in the lower right hand corner. Go ahead and comment on these videos and like it. It does help us a lot. And always remember, the hot's on the left, cold's on the right. You folks have a good day.